My name is Lim Hazel Masiga. I work at the Center for International Private Enterprise, and I'm honored to be your moderator today. Thank you for coming to Breakout Room 4. And here we'll be discussing about the role of research in promoting business ethics. I'm sure you're here because you found that topic very interesting, right? As we begin, we will get into the panel discussion. But before we do that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Ben Kiragu.
Yay!
Seems you're popular on this end. Mr. Ben Kiragu is our country director of the Center for International Private Enterprise Kenya. And he'll be making a presentation on a tool. It's a research. So he'll be telling us more about that. And then we will proceed from there. Welcome, Ben.
The work I'm about to present is a research that, or a mapping that SIPE conducts periodically. We call it the Corruption Risk Mapping Report or Anti-Corruption Assessment. Now, the purpose of this exercise, because we work with business, is to identify those areas where businesses are vulnerable, where businesses can be affected by corruption. Yani ninamaanisha ya kwamba hii utafiti ni kujaribu ili tuweze kujua ni sehemu gani ambazo biashara zitapatana na corruption. Ili kusaidia wanabiashara wajue nikifanya hivi ama hivi nitaweza kuzuia corruption na vile naweza kujipanga kibiashara. So the idea behind this is to identify those areas. So in terms of, and I won't cover all the slides because it's a bit long and I'm limited for time. There is just to say vile nimewaambia. It's just to say that, and sorry about that, that in terms of the aim of the study is to assess the state of corruption, I don't know why it's doing that in Kenya, and identify areas of risk. So that's the purpose. So even as I go along, you'll see what that means. Because like we all say, corruption is to affect sana. So tunasema, although the government is implementing a lot of laws and campaigns, we are not seeing a lot of change. What do I mean by that? Although serikali inaongea sana kuhusu mambo ya ufisadi, hatuoni mabadiliko makubwa. Na tunajiuliza kwa nini? So that's the purpose of this. So we want to understand where is Kenya, where corruption is concerned. How would you say Kenya is doing? And I know Sheila will be glad to see this one. Hii ni utafiti wa shirika ambalo linaitwa Transparency International, represented by Sheila. In as far as Transparency International is concerned, you can see how Kenya is rated. And you can see the change over the years between 2012 and 2023. And you can see the score. So this score, I believe, was in 2022. And it said that we were 126 out of 180 countries. In other words, if I get it right, kama ni mtihani, tungekuwa tuko nyuma. Tumepata 126 out of 180. Hiyo si kusema ati ni nyingi. Hiyo ni ukikaribia 180 you are worse. So the closer you are to 180, the worse off you are. Am I right, Sheila?
Yes, you are.
So the closer you are to 180, the worse you are. And alafu the same research ilisema ya kwamba 2022 tulishuka nafasi moja. We went down in terms of ile inaitwa maoni ya watu kuhusu corruption, especially wakiangalia maneno ya private sector, public sector, yani shirika za serikali. Tukiangalia 2022 tulishuka alama moja. So that is that's according to Transparency International. Alafu pia SIPE tunafanya utafiti kama the same sort of research. SIPE also does what we call corruption risk mapping. And the one for SIPE looks at various areas, looks at several components. Budget transparency, judicial independence, press freedom, e-citizenship, online services. Na SIPE ilipoangalia Kenya, what came out is that in principle tumekwama mahali moja, we are stationary. In the last 5 or so years hatuja improve, we have not improved, we seem to be stationary. Unajua mtu akikwama anaweza kurudi nyuma, si ndio? Yes, so that's what the site one showed. Moving on to another one, and this is just to kuonyesha mali tuko. EACC, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. So tunajua hiyo shirika.
Then
Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission walisema ya kwamba walipofanya utafiti when they did their research in 2023, walisema ya kwamba 6 out of 10 Kenyans wanasema corruption iko juu. Wana Kenya 6 baina ya 10 wanasema corruption iko juu. Again, 5 out of 10 are perceiving corruption has increased. Lakini jambo la kutatanisha, the worrying trend is the last point there. Ya kwamba walisema 2023 corruption, the average corruption iliongezeka by about 70%. In other words, mbeleni Wakenya walikuwa wanatoa corruption, ukienda kwa shirika la serikali mtu alikuwa anatoa kitu kama 7,000. Lakini sasa wanasema watu sasa wanatoa 11,000 ikiendelea kufika 12,000 kwa hongo. Tunaelewana? So the trend is showing, na hii ni shirika la serikali. This is a government institution saying this. So that is a trend that we are seeing. And kwa hivyo tulipoona hivyo, so we were asking ourselves the question, what can we do about it? So that's where we decided as SAIB to do this research. And the purpose of this research is firstly to assess the state of corruption, secondly to identify the areas of risk, and then thirdly to see what can we do about it. Okay? So if that is our problem, what can we do about it? And we know the impact of corruption on our businesses. Corruption makes business costs go up, makes it expensive to do business, makes our profitability goes down. Kwa sababu mtu akihonga, sasa mtu akanjwa akikuja kwa store yako kila saa unampatia 500 kwa sababu hajachukua license. Siku hiyo umepoteza profit yako. Unaona? Kwa hivyo corruption ina cost. Tunafikiriaga tukipatia mtu kidogo umejisaidia siku hiyo, but actually corruption costs. And that's what we say in business. Corruption costs. It may look profitable in the short term, but long term it costs us. So hii ni utafiti ambao tulifanya, tuliinterview watu kama 1,727. We interviewed 1,727 in 13 counties in Kenya. So that's where this research was done. And it was done through in-depth interviews, focus group discussions. Vile utafiti ilifanywa. Tuli-interview biashara 1,700. We did it in 13 counties. Vihiga is there. There's somebody from Vihiga here. Chebaya ametoka Vihiga leo. Watu wa Vihiga ndio hao. Uasin Gishu, Nakuru, Nairobi. Ilifanya kwa hizo counties. Mombasa, Machakos, Kisumu, Kisii, Kirinyaga, Kilifi, Kiambu, Embu na Bungoma. Sasa huu utafiti uligundua nini? What did this research reveal? Jambo la kwanza ni kwamba 67% wale ambao walijibu, the 67% said that perception of corruption or corruption has increased. Hiyo risk ya kitu cha pili wakasema kwamba haswa in the areas that have particularly shown a lot of corruption ni sehemu ya service na trade, ndio iko na corruption kubwa. Nani anafanya kazi ya trade hapa? Trade, any person is in business trade, yani mama mboga, unafanya retail, anybody who's doing mama mboga retail, those are retail businesses. Wanasema hapa that's a very high area of corruption according to this research. Na sehemu ya both service and trade iko juu sana. Manufacturing corruption iko chini kidogo, it's lower than the others. Then secondly, SMEs, biashara ndogo ndogo ndio haswa zinakuwa affected na haswa kuliko biashara kubwa na corruption. Alafu watu wa biashara wanalaumu public sector kwa ufisadi. Wanasema 53% walisema wanalaumu public sector, nao hawajilaumu, wanasema tu asilimia 12 peke yao ndio wanalaumu biashara, watu wa biashara. Lakini waulize, watu wa biashara wanalaumu serikali, lakini hawajilaumu. Kwani niulize, watu wa serikali wanafanya biashara na nani? See, that's what it's showing. It's showing that that private sector basically blames public sector. So these are the types of corruption that we found to be most prevalent.
So, yeah.
Fraud, bribery, tax evasion, embezzlement, extortion, abuse of office. Now, and this is consistent. This one was 2018, but it's the same finding that we found in 2022. The same group, same WhatsApp group. That these are still the prevalent 3 top forms of corruption in Kenya: fraud, bribery, and tax evasion are still the same, right? Tushasema. Alafu kuna sehemu 3 ya biashara. 3 areas of business are particularly vulnerable to corruption: procurement, sales and marketing, na finance. Remember that the purpose of this research ni kuwasaidia kuona ni sehemu gani ufisadi huko ili muweze kuzuia. The purpose is to show which areas of businesses are vulnerable to corruption. So that's what this found out. All right? I think the rest is just repeated, so I will not belabor the point. Then talking about barriers, these are some of the barriers. I could argue about inadequate legislation. There's enough legislation in Kenya, but we can argue about that. We found was one of the barriers. Lack of clear guidelines for the implementation of the Bribery Act. Now, these guidelines are there. I know the KEPSA Foundation developed the guidelines. What has happened is that these guidelines have not been publicized. They need to be. We need to go out and create awareness of the presence of the guidelines of the Bribery Act. And then the other thing that makes corruption very prevalent is cumbersome reporting processes. Wherever there are long processes, corruption tends to go up. And then weak enforcement mechanisms and inefficient judicial systems. Sasa, hebu nikuulize, who here can go and report a corrupt case to court or to a policeman? Has anybody ever gone and report corruption to an authority? Anybody who's bold enough to say that they've ever reported? Has anybody ever reported corruption anywhere? Somebody? You have reported. Which agency? Who did you report to? Just for?
The DCI.
The DCI. Okay. And did they do anything about it?
Right, because the boss they got on the team for having in Breakout.
Yes.
And I took what that area that's full.
Whoa, you must know some. Very good.
And the most come, but I get abuse.
So mnaona, to report has results. Kwa hivyo Wakenya wasimame wa report. But of course we need to be careful how you do it. You need to do it right. And we'll be talking later about whistleblower and things like that, protection and things like that. And then the other area that prevents is a barrier to corruption barrier to fighting corruption is harassment, which is what especially a majority of the small businesses in this group experience. To just going on is that we also find that high costs of legal services. If you want to engage legal services, that they are found to be very expensive. So most people do not want to go through that pain. We also find that even business associations have a problem because of lethargy among their members. Hawataki kujitokeza. You know, in our work inside, we work a lot with business associations. And one of the things we've been telling business associations is that they need to organize their members so that they can speak out against corruption. But who have we had talking about corruption of late? Who is speaking about against corruption these days?
The church.
The church? Sorry?
Yeah.
Kenyans on social media?
But they are free.
Have you had a business association talking about corruption? Not yet. We are hoping that nilikuwa sikia watu usikizi wanasalimiwa. Sijui kama watasalimiwa, lakini yeah. So and then the other challenge that we find, and this is what we highlight here, that these challenges that are highlighted are persistent. And year on, year out. If you see vitu zimeanza sasa, they've always been there. And we are not seeing a lot of change as we go along. In terms of the areas that we did of the respondents, mnaona a lot of businesses ranged from agriculture sector, construction sector, so on and so forth, mpaka wholesale and retail. And you see a lot of our business in Kenya is wholesale and retail. You notice that, it's very interesting. A lot of Kenyans are involved in wholesale and retail, hospitality, and some manufacturing. So I wonder what that says about Kenya. Biashara zetu sana sana ziko upande wa wholesale na retail. Huh? Yeah. So that's why we did the research in terms of the responses across the country. And this question was, tulikuwa nauliza biashara, umewahi experience biashara? Wewe ushaitishwa hongo kwa biashara yako? Tulikuwa nauliza mabiashara hizi. Kutoka Vihiga unaona walisema 86% wameitishwa hongo. Chabaya. Yes. Yaani asilimia 86, si ndio? Wameshaitishwa hongo Vihiga. Hiyo ndio iko juu sana. Ile ya chini sana ni gani? Bungoma ndio iko chini. Iko juu pia. Ile iko chini kabisa ni gani? Mombasa ndio iko chini. Mombasa iko na ngapi? Mombasa iko na 58. Nakuru ndio iko chini. Okay. Kirinyaga. Nakuru is 37. So hii ni kuonesha county, ukiangalia county unaona vile, kwa hivyo watu wana experience mambo ya hongo sana. Alafu sasa tukajiuliza sector hii, tushasema sana sana hongo iko upande wa services na trade. That's where most corruption is experienced in Kenya. And we know some of these things already, but when you have them researched and it's your country you're talking about, now you know these are the areas. So if you want to go into a business or you're in any of those businesses, you need to learn. Now, this was a very interesting finding. Now, I want to pick a business person. Any business person who has employees. Anybody who has employees. Mtu ameajiri watu. Kuna mtu ameajiri watu kwa biashara yake. Sasa, hii utafiti inaonyesha ya kwamba biashara zile ndogo ndio ziko na shida ya corruption. Unaona wala wameemploy 10 to 49 ndio wako na corruption at 56%. Hii biashara kubwa ambayo ina employ between 251 ndio iko na mambo ya corruption kidogo, unaona? Inateremka. So the smaller the business, the more exposed to corruption you are. Now, Kenya has more small businesses or big businesses? Small business. We are a small business economy. You can see the impact it has on Kenya. We're a small economy. It's the small people who are experiencing the impact of corruption. And ndio maana watu wataki wanyamaze, because we have been most affected. Another interesting finding is that the corruption is domiciled more and more in the mid-sized. 49%, those are lower and middle senior level managers, middle management. We are finding that there's more and more corruption in middle management as compared to the top. And that can be understood. That is the young people. What age is in the middle management? What age group? Millennials. So we are wondering as a country, and I'm glad my sister from Botswana is here, so she can see how we are struggling, where Botswana is doing much better than us. And the reason why we need to ask ourselves as a country, if this continues, this means that corruption is entrenched for another 2-3 generations. Yeah. So this is a worrying trend. And maybe we should stop, and they have to drive those Subarus on the weekend. I think this we've already said. Now, this is a slide earlier that we talked about, where people, when you ask private sector, ukiuliza private sector, wanasema it's a public sector that is responsible for corruption. Interesting. Okay. When you ask them, are you yourselves responsible for corruption? 12% wanasema yes. We 12%, yeah, maybe. And then 36% are saying private, both are responsible. So Wangari, you said something. You said that you agree that it's public sector. Yes. Okay.
And And the reason I say so, we've spoken about corruption since we were born. We found people talking about corruption and all that. And to this point, I believe that corruption is designed. In this country, corruption is part of our systems. And you can tell with the challenges when people try to fight corruption, right? You find that there is inadequate legislation. That is the work of the government, right?
Yes.
You find that there is lack of clear guidelines. Again, that is the work of the government. You find there is cumbersome process in reporting and everything. Again, that's the work of the government. So it is part of our system. If the government, all these things that have been mentioned here, they have nothing to do with us. They have everything to do with the government of the day, right? So if the government of the day did what it was supposed to do, ensure there is no harassment when I go to report, ensure that the cost of legal services is low, ensure that there is no weak enforcement, that is strong enforcement. You know, when we try to fight corruption, ensure that the process is not cumbersome. I think we will deal with corruption.
So I'm going to keep that question. We'll react to it because I want to challenge you about umepatia serikali jukumu zote. Wewe hujajipatia any. Okay. So in terms of sources of information, those are the sources that we found out. We asked ourselves, what are the sources of information about corruption in the private sector? We find out about corruption from court cases, from our associations, from the media, ukiangalia TV, that's why you find out, from information from customers and clients. Interesting, a lot of the information came from clients and colleagues, and then personal experience. So that's why we found out, people find out about corruption from those sources of corruption. Moving on, when we look at the issue of, and here we talked, also this is the same slide about information. When we looked at we talked here about this earlier, what are the departments that are prone to corruption? Again, you can see that from the top there, it starts with supplies, procurement and supply, sales and marketing, finance, and tax compliance, so on and so forth. But those are the top three that most people experience corruption in these areas in their businesses. And this is so that you can learn and you can see how you can organize those sectors, those areas of your business. Then in terms of what pushes people to be corrupt, we ask business people, why are you corrupt? Huh? And these are some of the reasons that they gave us, and you can see most of them, either to win business and stay ahead of the competition, to avoid problems with authorities, to pressure, implied nudges, pressure from public sector, to ili kazi yako ifanye haraka ndio, ama pressure, from private sector counterparts to access a service legally or illegally, so on and so forth. So these are the reasons that people say that they are corrupt. Kwa sababu unataka mambo yako iende haraka, unataka ile license toke haraka, unataka kupata ile biashara. So that's why people are corrupt. So some of the reasons we found out, right? Then again, those are the push factors. The reasons what encourages or pushes people to be corrupt. Again, public sector as a root of corruption, because you won't access business from the public sector. You want to corrupt public sector because their orders are big. Then they give you big business. I don't know what it is about us. Then there's competition and greed, the need to become wealthy quickly. There's that pressure that we have. Then also systemic weaknesses give opportunity for that to happen. And then mutual interdependence and shared responsibility. I don't even remember what that one was about. But anyway, let's see whether we'll look at it again going forward. Then in terms of the consequences of corruption, how does corruption affect your business? And we find that the biggest impact of corruption is poor business performance, impact on growth and profitability. We say, and I know Anthony would speak more to this about the research shows that corruption takes away 10 to 20% of your profitability or increases your cost by 10 to 20%. So corruption also deals reputational image. Yani ukihusiana na watu ambao wanafanya corruption, pia wewe utakuwa affected. Let me give you an example. I know of some companies that were involved in the Adani local companies in Kenya who are involved with Adani. They're the ones who are promoting Adani in the Kenya media. That has really backfired on them as an organization, as a local business, because they are the ones who are doing the PR. So people are coming back and telling them, how can you do that for us? You know, that's a very real example. So it can have, short term you'll get the business, yes, but long term for business sustainability, it'll impact your business. And then loss of, you can lose your, licenses, loss of clients, high cost of doing business. I talked about that earlier. Poor quality of corruption, poor quality of products. Sorry, unajua sasa, because you are corrupting government officials. Ukienda KEBS, umepeleka KEBS waangalie vitu yako, labda unatengeneza njugu ama unatengeneza peanut butter ama unatengeneza juice, so you've taken it to KEBS for it to be certified. If you know you can pay the KEBS person, what will you do? Stabili mtu wa KEBS na kitu yako we approve na uende market. What does that do? That means ndio maana mnapata vitu zinaingia kwa soko zinadhuru watu. Kwa maana mtu wa KEBS ulienda ukampatia kitu akapitisha nini yako ikaingia kwa market, kumbe hii kitu iko na madhara. So you end up with poor quality products in the market. Na maana unasikia kuna mafakes mingi. Unanunua kitu nafikiria ni original. Ukifika nyumbani kama ni radio inafanya kitu siku moja siku mbili inaacha kufanya kazi, kumbe ni fake ulinunua. So these are impacts of corruption. These are the real impacts of corruption. And then this one is people. How aware are people about laws that speak to corruption? Watu wanajua masheria ni gani zinajulikana. Watu sana wanajua Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, ndio wanajua sana. Hawajui sheria nyingine. Sana wanajua kuna, of course, kuna katiba ya Kenya, there's a Kenya law. Lakini ile sheria ambayo inahusiana na mambo ya corruption sana Bribery Act haijulikani. So you see, so in terms of knowledge, watu watawajui masheria ambazo watatumia, so on and so forth. So that's something else that we are seeing. Na hii pia ni kusema, this is the same thing we are saying here. Ni sheria gani ambayo watu wanaweza kutumia. Na again, watu wanasema Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Constitution, so on and so forth. Watu wajue ya kwamba kuna masheria ambazo ziko watu wanaweza kutumia na watu wanapaswa kuzijua ili waweze kuzitumia. So I think hii ni kurudia ili kusema ya kwamba hii hapa tulikuwa tunajiuliza hizi incidences ni watu wanareport wapi? Na kuna dada mmoja amesema alireport kwa DCI. That's very rare, but how many are there reporting mechanisms in your organization? Kwa biashara yako, is there a way to report corruption? And which ones are being used? Are they internal ones in the business or outside of the business? So that's one thing this is asking. And what we found out is that asilimia 66 wanasema they are willing to report corruption. Lakini asilimia 30.7 walisema hapana, hawataki kureport corruption. Shida ni kwamba watareport aje. Hiyo shida iko. Where do they report? They are willing to report but they don't know where to report or how to report.
Yes.
And then sasa hizi ni mashida za sheria. Tunasema inaonekana kama mambo ya sheria ina favor public sector. Inaonekana kama ile maneno ya witness protection is inadequate, haitoshi. Watu wanaona ni kama hawataki kureport kwa sababu they will be affected personally. Alafu kuna mambo ambayo nilisema ukienda kureport DCI watakwambiaje? Kitu cha kwanza walikwambia uandike statement. Sasa watu wengi wataki hiyo maneno. Sasa unaambiwa uende ukae hapo, umeacha biashara yako, ukae hapo siku mzima uandike statement. Watu wataki vitu kama hizo. Alafu wanaona kama judiciary haifanyi kazi vile inapaswa. It's not efficient in the way it's working. So Kenyans are unwilling to report because of some of the challenges that challenge why we are not, policy and regulatory issues. and then harassment, high legal costs, deliberate delays. Sasa ukiweka kesi utakuwa kotini miaka ingine 2. And then tunaona kama kuna what we call limited capacity of the law enforcement to pursue cases. Unaenda kwanza unaambiwa kama unataka hii kesi tufuatilie, eka kitu kwa meza. Sio mtu anaambiwaga na OCS. Sasa tukiangalia maneno ya associations. Kama hapa kuna association ya wanawake, Women Leadership Entrustment. Wangare? Nyinyi mnaangalia maneno ya ufisadi. Hapa, so this research inasema ya kwamba hizi ndio changamoto ambazo mko nazo. Difficulty in recruiting members, disparity in guidelines, inadequate sector, specific sector approaches. Kwa hivyo hapo kuna kazi inafaa ifanywe. I'm rushing here. And I want to go to one slide, which I'll make my final slide, which is not recommendations. Kuna kuwa hapa general recommendations.
And
Tukiangalia mbele, what does the report recommend? Jambo la kwanza recommend that a campaign to promote private sector to increase understanding of anti-corruption laws, particularly SMEs. There is lack of knowledge and lack of awareness. Kama ukiangalia hiyo sheria ya Bribery Act 2016, watu haijui. So we need to create awareness of the laws that are there, particularly among small businesses. Because small businesses, shida ya small businesses ni kwamba small business ina focus na kazi ya biashara, hazitaki mambo ingine. Nataka kufocus million business, production, sales. Kwa hivyo wana avoid maneno mingi sana. Ukianza kwa maneno mingi hawataki, they don't have the resources to engage in this in seeking knowledge, so on and so forth. So we're saying there needs to be some work in terms of awareness. The other thing we say is that we need to build capacity building of the individual businesses. How do you implement a compliance system? How do you avoid corruption? For example, I'll give a very simple example. Tuliuliza wanabiashara in another meeting. Annually, you have to renew your license yako ya biashara, si ndio? Annually. How much is a business license? Anybody? Anybody? An example?
in the budget,
10,000? Tuseme 10,000. What business people do? Si mtu akanjo atakuja, they come to check the license at the beginning of the year. Because businesses have a problem with cash flow. Mtu akanjo anakuja, unamwambia sasa niko na hii 500, sichukue hiyo 500. Wewe vile unafikiria ni ya kwamba akichukua hiyo 500 amekusaidia. Lakini huyo mtu next month atakuwa wapi? Hapo kwako. Vile tunaambia wanabiashara ni hivi. If you paid for that 10,000, ukiangalia mwisho wa mwaka ile pesa utakuwa umetumia either itakuwa the same ama more. Ama vile pia atakuwa amekusaidia, amekusumbua, anakuinterrupt, unajisikia unakaa, unahisi uko na uoga, when you're sitting there you are wondering with this city council. So we're telling Kenyans, you see, because they need to understand the impact of corruption. If they understood that if they paid for that license at once, they would actually save long term. That's the sort of capacity building that we need with our people. Kwa sababu tunajua hizi biashara kubwa zinahitaji more complex systems that Anthony does, more very complicated systems. Lakini watu wa biashara ndogo, simple things that make your business less exposed. And then tunasema mambo ya digitalization, mambo imepelekwa e-citizen, so you don't have to go to the government office. Inapunguza your interaction with the government officials. Number 3, tunasema ya kwamba lazima wenye biashara wajitolee kufanya kazi ya anti-corruption. And that's what we were saying in that room. Leo tumesikia Safaricom imesema iko very serious about anti-corruption. Tumesikia Absa imesema iko serious about anti-corruption. Tumesikia gani ingine ilikuwa huko? KQ. Unanisalimia? Oh, okay. Oh, vizuri. Okay, sawa. Tutamaliza. And then hizo zingine tumesema ni simplifying compliance processes, and then tukue serious na hii maneno ya monitoring and evaluation. Ni kusema ya kwamba kila mwaka na mambo ya risk assessment and compliance ni kuangalia kila mwaka how biashara yako inafanyaje on issues of corruption na kupunguza, kuendelea. Hii ni kitu continuous mnaendelea kufanya. And I think I want to stop it there, Lim. Thank you. Asanteni. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Hazel, and also Ben, for that presentation. I think Ben already described what we do in the CPI, the Corruption Perceptions Index. It's it's a composite index. Yani inachukua utafiti, inaangalia utafiti mengine kwa Kiswahili kama ya Ben, na angalia utafiti zingine ambazo zimechapishwa ulimwenguni, alafu compare. What do you say compare? Linganisha. And then looks at now, and most of this research is from the feedback inatoka kutoka wafanyabiashara na pia watu ambao wanajihusisha na mambo ya sekta ya umma, because they're the ones who experience corruption. So hao ndio wako na maoni na pia recommendations in terms of what can we do better, what are we doing in terms of addressing hii shida ya ufisadi. So that's what I can say about CPI, but Ben already alionyesha alama ambayo Kenya iliweza kupata mwaka uliopita 2023, na mwaka ujao pia Februari tutaweza kuchapisha edition nyingine ya CPI kuonyesha vile ambavyo tunafanya kama nchi kuhusu hii vita dhidi ya ufisadi. Lakini if I'm just to comment on some of the issues that Ben has or at least what this research has shown, I just noted a few things. Now, for instance, the issue that the service and trade sectors report higher incidences of corruption compared to manufacturing, I think it's largely because there's a lot of human interaction. I think Ben alisema Bakanjo, kuna all these people who are looking at issues around licenses. People say it's also easier, it's faster to just bribe, if you're not in compliance. And what we have always proposed is, can we consider use of ICT? And maybe 10 years ago, ingekuwa ngumu kusema kwamba to ensure that all our systems are ICT centered. But now most of us have phones. Kuna mtu bado anatumia mulika mwizi. See, most people, I think right now many people are on it's either Samsung, Oppo, Androids or whatever. Yeah. So people are accessing internet on their phones. eCitizen, I think most services for businesses and most of you are using eCitizen. So the question was, why can't we have some of these services just to limit the human interaction? You look at what eCitizen has done for passport, driving license, ID issues. So they made it much easier, and we've actually seen the cases of corruption go down in some of those departments, Department of Immigration, even Department of Business Registry, Company Registry. All the corruption has actually gone down because of, the reduced human interaction. The question about small and medium-sized enterprises being more vulnerable to corruption, we saw that. I think you said, first I thought in a big company, where you have more than 100 employees, that is why it gets complicated to be able to oversight all those people. But then when you think about it, those big companies, they have systems. When you have you will make sure that you put systems, structures, just to be able to manage maybe the volume of work, the number of people. So HR processes are more streamlined. You have also e-procurement. You're using ERPs. More advanced ERP systems, kulipa vendors and all these things. Procurement is probably also in an ICT platform. But in a small business, maybe you're thinking, maybe to go to watu 10, watu 20, so hautaweka hiyo effort ya kuwa na systems. And then that is where the corruption happens. That's how I probably understood it. And that's why it's important that even if you're a small business, because you don't want to lose the money, it is you as a, if you're a business owner, and even just as an employee, you may think that, okay, ni pesa mkubwa, but it is still money that could have, maybe it could be money that could have been used to increase your salary in this very hard economic, in this very hard brutal economic regimes. Yeah. And then also the issue about the lower, middle, senior level management implicated in most corruption, they're the gatekeepers. But then people think that when you to go coach, maybe many times you don't even know what is going on.
Yeah, that's true.
We only get things to approve. And by that time they have been processed through people at that middle level. Kama ni ukora imefanyika, kama ni deals zimechapishwa, So by the time it gets to you at the top and CEO, you would assume that things have been done in a proper way. And they will look like they've been done in a proper way. Kama it is, if it's the papers, the documentation to be put together, so that you get an impression that things are okay, that has been done. But it is that is how I would explain it. I'm not surprised that bribery, procurement, tax and fraud related tax evasion, procurement fraud and tax evasion are considered the most prevalent and impactful forms of corruption, because even ukiangalia makesi ambayo EACC imekuwa ikichunguza na pia kesi ambazo zimepelekwa kotini, you find most of them, in fact EACC inasema that more than 90% ya kesi ambazo EACC inapeleka kotini are actually procurement related. Yeah, hapo ndio ukora iko. So we probably need to look at our procurement system. I think it means that as businesses we really must see how to strengthen that particular aspect. And in fact, even when the research talked about which are the functions, from the functions in companies that are largely vulnerable to corruption, you talked about procurement and you talked about supplies and sales.
Sales and marketing.
Sales and marketing. But sales and marketing, what are people with those sales and the sales and marketing people, they probably paying bribes to get procurement deals. So it's still procurement.
It's still procurement, yes.
Yeah, so that procurement issue is a big problem, and it means it must, we need to do something about it. There was a question around, the inadequate legislation and then lack of awareness and understanding. I was shocked that just 0.9%, actually the one that of bribery didn't shock me, because it's a relatively new law. It was just passed, I think, in 2017.
Yes.
Regulations just gazetted, was it last year?
Last year.
So that didn't shock me that we had 6% awareness. But the 0.9% for procurement laws, that shocked me. Because the procurement laws have been there with us for some time. I know they've been changed, they've been amended over various times. Even now I think they're being considered as some amendments being proposed. But it has been there for some time. So I wondered, why aren't business people aware about the procurement laws? Because that affects them. Because who are they? Many people deal with government. Many people are dealing with government, trying to get contracts from government. So it is their business to understand these procurement laws. And I think if maybe there was more awareness of these procurement laws, maybe there'll be less corruption. Because then you'd understand what is the impact, or what are the consequences of engaging in corruption as you bid, and what are your rights also as you bid for these tenders. You need to know your rights, and so that even when you don't get those tenders and you suspect that there's corruption, you're able to report. Because a big problem that we have, and we also touched on it, the reporting is very poor. Reporting of corruption is very poor. I understood, I'm just going to mix things a bit, because you also talked about the witness protection, whistleblower mechanisms. That's what we are currently pushing for a law. Because many people, including business people, don't want to come, especially business people. In fact, most people report corruption, ni raia tu wa kawaida. Like she said, she reported her case. Many business people don't want to report because wanaogopa kwamba ukireport, then that means you will not get that next. It will jeopardize your relationship, or it could lead to acts of reprisal or revenge. Where now you will not get those, you will not get another opportunity from that government entity. But I think that in the fullness of time, you need to think about it, that you may miss that one or two opportunities. But if you don't report, it means that the system becomes more rotten, and goes deeper, and that even jeopardizes your any further opportunity. So it's in our best interests to report. Even the issue around harassment and extortion from authorities, we mentioned that, Ben, as one of the challenges. And I just wondered, what is so hard about just saying no, calling out, and then also reporting? I think us since it was 30 years, so used to this calling out. But for businesses, and I was even talking to someone earlier, that businesses feel like they don't want to, to risk. But I feel like if you don't bring these things out, where you say corruption, come and say me, itakuwa worse. So we better deal with it. It may be bad in the intermediate, in the short term, but in the future it will make things better. So we must learn how to see how to address. Let me conclude. When you talked about now this one in terms of the challenges faced by business associations, in terms of tackling corruption, you talked about lack of synergy, weak oversight. inadequate sector-specific approaches, and disparities in guidelines in terms of dealing with corruption. And I wondered, I know we have various business business membership initiatives. There's Global Compact Network, SCEPSA, there's CAM, there's the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce. And I wondered why this cannot come together, because I've seen that most of them have ethics programs. And why can't, like, help them come together in a coalition? In fact, all these things their businesses are facing is a lack of voice. Lack of that collective voice. Can we have one business coalition dealing with corruption? Yeah, you have separate. I know each of them deals with separate. CAM deals with manufacturers. CEPSA is a bit wider. Global Compact. I know you're dealing with specific issues. Yeah, but you need a singular anti-corruption initiative, bringing all those associations together. Now you can raise all these things, all these challenges in terms of reporting issues around procurement, and you tackle them head on. I feel that will, sometimes, like for us in civil society, that's how we do it. I may not want to raise something alone as Transparency International, but I get together with other. Tukiwa na press conferences, tunafanyanga kama tuko wengi, such that, and then we are a coalition, such that in government, then if someone decides to attack you, where will they start? Because we are 30 or 20 of us. So how can businesses take that wider approach, not just as SCEPSA, not just as Global Compact, but as a wider coalition to address some of these challenges that you're facing? That should be, I know because of time, that should just be my initial feedback to the research findings.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for those comments. That's a lot to the Sipasilio. But just to also ask the room, and this is a thought that I want you to think about at Okenda home. Are you going to be part of the problem or part of the solution? And I'd like them to respond to Wangari's question and what Wangari was saying in terms of blaming the public sector. What role does the private sector play in combating corruption, and especially businesses seated in the room? What can you tell them as something that they need to walk away with? I know we've gone through the research, some information of a screening is quite depressing, especially if you find yourself in those particular sectors where corruption is the most. You might go home thinking, yeah, I didn't know. So what can they take home as there to do?
Okay. I hear what Wangari is saying, and where we are thinking government has got so much responsibility.
Yeah.
But that's what this conference is about. This conference is about private sector taking responsibility. So that we are not just saying the serikali's idea, but what is our responsibility? Because we are part of the Kenyan society. And that speaks to what Sheila just said. How can we organize ourselves ili tukuwe na sauti ya kusikika? Shida yetu wanabiashara ni kwamba tumesambaratika, kila mtu yuko na kitu yake, na hataki kufanya kazi na mtu mwingine. Na hiyo ndio swali tunapaswa. We need to answer that question. We need to come up with a solution. How can private sector speak in one voice? You see, when the church speaks, the Catholic Church speaks with authority, kwa sababu wako pamoja. The PCA church, the whichever church, the civil society. Lakini kija kwa private sector, CEPSA inaongea, Chamber inaongea, kando. And that is the problem we need to solve now. How do we do it? Now, that is a challenge that we are trying to address now. How do you bring these organizations, and maybe we need your suggestions. Hizi shirika za biashara tutaziletaje pamoja? Because don't forget, Kenya Private Sector Alliance is a super coalition, Sheila.
It's a super coalition
So ideally, and if CEPSA was here, and I don't know if there's anybody for CEPSA, I can say this without hiding, but that's one role that maybe they could do better on bringing the business sector together. Sasa kwa sababu wafanye kazi, tutakaa chini tungoje? No. So, Shira, just to inform you, a few business associations have started to speak together. We had a retreat last week. Although we were talking sana to do with mambo ya finance.
Yeah.
That's what we started. We were trying to form a coalition. Actually, KEPSA were there, CAM were there, FKE were there. But it's a very delicate journey. Na ni kwa nini? Kwa nini wanabiashara wana behave hivyo? Ni kwa sababu manufacturing association wakienda meet the president, wanataka kufight for what? Mambo wa manufacturing. Watu wa chemba wakienda wanataka tu mambo yao. So there's a division. They wana protect biashara zao na interests zao. That's what we need to get. So vile tunafikiria, one of the ideas, tutafute jambo ambalo zina affect kila mtu wa biashara. For example, tuseme ma interest rates zimeenda juu sana. Businesses lazima ziongee. So how can we come together and talk about interest rates? Mkubwa, are we out of time?
Yes.
Okay, tupatie a few. So, but we need ideas on how from you. Tutajipangaje, and how can we, maybe good to get ideas from you, how we can organize the private sector. But those are some of the initiatives that we're thinking about. But it's not easy. Kwa sababu kama yes, okay, so I'll leave it there. Thank you. I can see there's some responses from the
All right, let me
audience.
just move around with the microphone. So I just quickly wanted to give some encouragement in terms of what we did
Yes.
in terms of reducing the impact of reducing human interaction or going the ICT route, which I think should be probably the eighth general recommendation. So I think maybe 6 years ago, we used to have the same problem in terms of registering your company, your business. We have to go to a very far off place from town and register, start the process. And everything was done manually on paper. It took like months for you to get your company registration. And then what used to happen as well was, obviously now with the company secretaries, you have to pay them extra money. They tell you they know people inside who can make the process quicker. So what the government did was everything went online. So now with online, you can register your company within 24 hours. And you pay everything online. It's very cheap. Everyone can do it for themselves. So what that has done, obviously, dealt with a whole lot of that much.
Yes.
And now even company secretary service fees are very low because there's no extra cost, basically. So I just wanted to share that in terms of, if there's that political will to actually go that route, that ICT route, it actually does a lot to help. Because now everybody is well aware that they actually don't need to pay anybody to register their business.
Yes. Thank you. Great.
With the vulnerable businesses, about this digital way, they are never taught. Like something like e-citizen. Corruption will still be there because they don't know what that is. They have to go to cybers or to somebody who knows about it, and you see, they have to pay for it. Even if they ask for 200 shillings and it's something urgent, they have to pay. So, if educating these small businesses, akina mama boga, how to go about it, I think we can reduce corruption.
I think mine as a researcher is to say the place of research, to highlight the consequences of corruption. I think something that we really need to unpack. And I think also research ultimately equips businesses to integrate, the ethics into their core strategies for business, because that's the only way you can be able to have sustainability. So I'm so glad that I located myself in this particular engagement, because research is my area, and listening to Ben, I can listen to you until evening. I wish we had more time so that we can expand more. Thank you so much.
My name is Phoebe Mwangi. I'm an advocate of the High Court, and I'm also a good governance enthusiast. I'm very passionate about the gender dimensions of corruption, and therefore I'm very curious as to whether this research has explored the impact of corruption on women-owned businesses, specifically, vis-a-vis businesses that are owned by men. Because we have to admit that when it comes to that gender aspect, corruption for women expands, because we're talking about things like sextortion, sexual favors for things to be done, quickly. Figures being solicited even from public sector to private sector. So I'm curious whether that aspect has been even extending to things like the age of these women. So are women above 50 more likely to suffer from the implications of corruption more than women that are younger? And especially now that statistics are showing the service and trade sectors as the most impacted, I mean, my understanding or my observation, especially in Kenya, is that those sectors are predominantly or primarily dominated by women, and therefore there could be something interesting there to look out for. I wish we had more time to discuss that, but thank you very much.
So thank you for that. I hope I'm not locking anyone. Maybe just a parting shot from Sheila and Ben. And Sheila, maybe just to borrow lessons from the civil society organization in the process of trying to speak in one voice. What are some of the best practices that you could share with the private sector?
I think it's just the organizing. We learned to organize ourselves into those and make our movements and coalitions much more sustainable. I'm happy that Ben says that there's an effort to do that. I think you have to, for maybe private sector, is to find what's that incentive. Of course, you want to make profits. In fact, for you, your incentive is so clear. For us, it's because we just want to make Kenya a better country. We are fighting for the public interest, and that's what drives us, that we want the Kenyan lives to be better. For you, I would imagine businesses, it is, of course, make life better, but first is to make money. And I think for them, it is actually a life, it is a do or die issue, because right now, me, all I can say there, I look at things how out there, they're not getting business opportunities. Business opportunities right now, the productive sectors have been killed. Manufacturing, agriculture, do you hear this government talking about it? Because the moment you start working on manufacturing and agriculture, it means local businesses are going to benefit, and that means the real local businesses. But that means what happens to their briefcase companies, the ones that are getting all these contracts to import goods because our manufacturing sector is not thriving, to import food because our agricultural sector is not thriving, and that's the reason why they are killing it, because if it thrives, they will not get opportunities to import. And they need to make quick money so that they can recover money from the money they spent in the elections in 2022 and money that they need for the elections in the next year. We need to connect these issues around financing of elections, financing of politics, then who gets contracts after people get into government, who's able to extract from the center. We need to connect this, and I think that's why I feel private sector needs to identify what's that incentive, what's the incentive of the politicians, what's the incentive, and then what do they need to do to ensure that they continue to profit and return this country to where it should be in terms of the economy. And we can't build this economy if local businesses are not thriving.
So, whenever I listen to Sheila, I live very challenged.
But don't depressed.
Challenged largely. And I'll say this, interesting you should say the word depressed. One of the things that I'll admit, it gets quite discouraging doing this work. And I'll tell you why. It's private sector that discourages me, not civil society, not because as SIPE we fund this work, correct?
Yeah.
Now, the idea we fund it, we are not sustainable in the way we fund it, because tomorrow we are doing this, next time we'll be doing rights on pigs. So we can move our emphasis, But now we're trying to do this for private sector, but private sector are not getting it. And what I said in the morning is Safaricom should be able to fund this work because they can see the knock-on effect on their business. So for me, what I want to, first of all, I'm challenged, number one. I'm really seeing that, that's why I was even asking Soji, what is a hook? How do we get businesses interested in funding this work rather than kupanda miti? Climate change is important, I'm not refusing, but corruption is a bigger threat to Kenya right now than climate change. Because itatumaliza kabla climate change haijatupata. Unaona? So, so my encouragement, that's my challenge and also my encouragement. But I'll also challenge businesses. Be willing to stand out. Oh no, you might be saying utajionesha when you stand out, but now your children watapata biashara gani kama itakulwa yote na corruption. So for me, I'm challenged to do something and I'm willing to take ideas. One last one. I know Transparency International have an integrity award. And we are also thinking of an integrity award that's targeted on businesses. Lazima watu ambao wanafanya kazi nzuri kwa mambo ya corruption watambulike na waheshimiwe na wapewe zawadi, si ndio? Ndio tujue Wangari is doing a good business, she's not corrupt. Right now the problem is hatujui ni nani mwenye biashara anafanya kazi nzuri na hafanyi. Anyway, so I could go on, as you can tell. Let me stop there. Thank you, Lim. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ben. Let's appreciate Ben and Sheila for taking their time to give their valuable insights. You can now go ahead and take your seat.
Thank you.